to the point of consumption, and then build the conspiracies all the way in. And Lee Berger, for a number of years, has rightly agitated, particularly on the West Coast, that we need to bring some common sense. While we might not be able to push the limit as far as we want on medical marijuana, we can certainly agree that if you're in California, Oregon, Nevada, Vermont, Rhode Island, that if you have access to medical marijuana in those states and you travel to another state, particularly another state with medical marijuana, well, there should be reciprocity there, to be sure. And this is something we should be able to do quite logically. It has to be done, I think, through legislation, but we should agitate through litigation to get to that point. We have Jerry's going to go through big cases that the Supreme Court, the appellate courts are looking at, but when it comes to Washington, D.C., there's not a whole lot in play right now. You have H.R. 5842. It's the third or fourth version of a medical marijuana bill. Frankly, it's not going to go anywhere in this Congress, and even ASA, Americans for Safe Access, are not advocating strongly for it. But it is in the hopper, and the debate is out there. It's not going to get a subcommittee hearing. The bill that we're more excited about is H.R. 5843, the first decriminalization bill introduced in Congress in 25 years. Barney Frank and Ron Paul introduced the bill, and we picked up 4 or 5 co-sponsors in the last couple of weeks. Again, in this presidential election, there will be no subcommittee hearings on this, to be sure. We've got to get through the next election. The Democrats will probably shore up a lot more House seats, certainly in the Senate. Who knows where the presidential race will go. But generally speaking, we've got a better chance next year to vet this, and really decriminalization is the heart and soul of what most marijuana law reform is about these days, and it's great to have a bill, a maypole for us to all run around. We're into the 10th year of the John Getman petition, which is the extension of NORML's 22-year, NORML versus DEA. So in 1997, NORML, along with former director John Getman and now 5 or 6 other groups, have 10 years, and these are 20-year proceedings to get through these rescheduling, but we're about the halfway mark. Those are proceeding along. The government has unbelievable opportunities to use dilatory tactics to pull this out to about a 2-decade-old fight. ASA, Americans for Safe Access, has something called a Data Quality Act challenge. It's kind of obscure. It was raised years ago in the environmental movement. It's never really been implemented effectively. It's never been used, but it was ideally set up, and I think everybody would agree that when government is going to implement a policy based on science, that it actually use real science and not bullshit. And so the environmental movement was able to get this DQA passed. It's never really been used, but ASA, quite smartly now, has gone before them and said, listen, with all this amazing scientific information about marijuana out there regarding medical marijuana specifically, the government needs to actually employ verifiable and credible data. And that is going on. That's now into its 3.5-year challenge. This summer we will go through what I call Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment 5.0. That will be the 5th time that the Hinchy-Rohrabacher Amendment will come up. That simply is nothing more than a spending amendment. We debate it every year. I personally think it's not a very good vehicle for reform. It's just essentially like a plebiscite. Last year, 162 members of the House voted for it. What it would do would stop the federal government, the DEA most notably, from spending federal dollars in states where there is medical marijuana laws on the books. And there's really no chance that it's going to pass. But it will be debated again. It'll be on C-SPAN. It'll be one of the few times that Congress actually talks about the issue of medical marijuana. And the Senate, by the way, has never even said the word medical marijuana. We have such a huge row to hoe in the Senate in the years to come. Michigan. Michigan will, I believe, become the 13th or 14th state that will have medical marijuana laws. Polling focus groups are excellent. It comes in usually between 58 and 65%, which is excellent. And it will have the most progressive laws in the Midwest, to be sure. It will certainly be the hallmark in the Midwest. Missouri, Illinois, Minnesota, and Ohio are all debating these, but Michigan, will lead the way likely on this. Massachusetts, while the focus in polling groups aren't clear that it's going to pass, they have a decriminalization initiative before them, and I'm from Massachusetts. I'd like to say I'm confident it's going to pass, but in 1998 there were similar initiatives put forward, and the Archdiocese of Boston and others really came down hard on it, and this incredibly liberal state, pause for laughter. No. We all hope it passes, but it's not clear that it's going to at this point, but it will certainly make big news. And Maine already has medical marijuana laws on the books. DPA, Drug Policy Alliance, came in last week with an emergency grant of about $50,000 to resurrect an initiative process up there. They're almost certainly going to get the signatures they need. They only need about 47,000 or so. And that only amends the current law that effectively just makes it better, to use layman's terms. So those 3 states will be voting and binding initiatives. New Mexico and Rhode Island. New Mexico, I have great fear that New Mexico is not going to follow through the legislation that it passed. It passed medical marijuana laws that are the most progressive in that they call for a distribution, whether that's the state distributing cannabis or whether they license a third party. But I think many of us would think that, and I'm certainly one of them, thinks that this is not possible under the current federal law. And so what I think is going to happen in New Mexico is they're going to balk on this. It's going to essentially be a self-preservation law. Individuals will be able to grow cannabis, possess a small amount, but the state is not going to touch a seed or a clone and hand it off to another person. I think rightly they might be in violation of federal law. Rhode Island, though, Rhode Island has passed a much more progressive law, and their Senate voted 24-3, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And while their House has to take a look at this, if they pass it and it is veto-proof, because last year we had to actually get through a governor's veto, and we did, to get medical marijuana on the books there. So Rhode Island could actually be the first state that would pass laws that would effectively